Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to another edition of the podcast. With me today, I have Avinash Tripathi, who is the founder and chief strategy officer of HelpShift. Hey, Avinash, how are you doing?
Hey, Adrian. Great to connect with you again.
Yeah, perfect. So Avinash, for the benefit of our sort of listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm an engineer by training, technologist, and I've spent a lot of time in the industry, mostly in sort of what I would call the, computer-based communication between humans. So in the early part of my life, I worked for a database company called Oracle, but that was just the first 4 years. And after that, I moved on to a company that basically was in the space of making email popular with the rise of the internet. And we were an email infrastructure provider for telcos. We ended up creating a lot of, products for telecoms, including inventing WAP, which was the first generation of how you actually access the internet on your mobile device.
Yeah, I remember WAP phones.
Yeah. And then I got to run the messaging side of that mobile business and helped in the creation of a standard called MMS, which was used to transmit, rich messages, unlike SMS, which is text oriented.
Yeah. And
then I also led the unified communications team, and we built the first IP-based voicemail platform. And this was like back in the days when UC was not even a term. And so I've worked all my life in basically communication technology for humans. And HelpShift is a very interesting sort of I would say evolution of my life, where I'm taking all of the things that I did in the first 20 years of my life with communication technology and really figuring out how it can have an impact on business.
Right.
And, customer service is one of those areas where, businesses get to touch their customers a lot. And it's not something that customers enjoy. I mean, universally, what I observed is that basically the experience is not great. People dread calling a brand for customer service, getting on the phone, waiting on hold. And it's just this constant sort of, pain in the industry. And, basically I wanted to apply all of the accumulated knowledge on sort of communication technologies and figure out what are the ways to optimize that communication so that humans didn't hate that experience of customer service.
Yeah.
And the side effect of that is also that brands enjoy, a better sort of outcome for their business because their customers are enjoying that interaction so much.
Yeah.
So that's really the genesis of HelpShift, which was founded in 2012. And the main idea was that, if you look at contact centers or customer service operations worldwide, basically it's still conducted in a very traditional manner. We direct everyone to a phone number that is manned by a bunch of human beings sitting in a call center. And inherently, because it's human scale, there's a bunch of waiting and unpleasant interactions that happen.
Sure.
Automation doesn't really exist a lot. There are lots of CRM tools, but they don't really deliver automation. All the CRM tools do is provide a dashboard for an agent to be able to interact with the customer, have the history and all of that stuff. But they don't really solve the pain of trying to automate some of these interactions to provide a better experience. So the first thing that we did is we observed that with the smartphone era and with the introduction of, the iPhone, that consumer behavior is going to change in a huge way. Communication was going to change. People were going to move away from, calling to more of an asynchronous messaging paradigm. And that's exactly what happened. If you really look at what's going on today, none of us actually call each other. We basically find it really convenient to text each other simply because it's at our own time and we respect the other party's time, and it's not this live conversation that has to happen.
Yeah.
And 80% of the communication in our life is non-urgent, doesn't need us to be tethered to a line with another person at the end. It can happen asynchronously. And that's the beauty of all of these modern sort of over-the-top messaging paradigms that you see win today, is because it gives that flexibility to us as humans so we can scale all our interactions with other humans. And so we brought that into the contact center experience. And so messaging becomes the primary enabler of the next generation sort of, communication technology for the contact center. But underpinning that, messaging is also a very powerful medium to enable what we call chatbots.
Yeah.
And these bots are essentially automation technology that's embedded within the messaging framework and allows human beings to interact with machines and be able to, carry on sort of transactions in the form of a communication or on a conversation. And that's really what we enable. So one part of what we do is this amazing sort of messaging technology that gets embedded in a digital channel of a brand, whether it's an app or a website. And backing that is an automation platform that enables large-scale automation of the most common questions that a customer may ask in customer service. And we also further back that up by an agent experience where once the automation has reached its limits, it can invoke a human interaction and the human can take over from where the automation stopped. And it can do it in a very symbiotic manner where we treat the bots as just like human agents. They're just very narrowly skilled, unlike human agents.
Right.
And humans and bots can work hand in hand to make the engagement with the customer very powerful. So that's really what HelpShift does.
Okay. I mean, am I right in saying that you sort of HelpShift kind of cut its teeth in the gaming industry? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if you really think about what we were pushing an alternative approach to the stale, customer service interactions out there, right? And the ones that were the earliest to adopt were the digitally savvy brands, right?
Yeah.
And gaming had the dynamics of being purely digital. They didn't have to be in traditional omni-channel. They could do everything in digital. So that was one of the first things that worked for us in gaming.
Yeah.
Second thing that, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the second thing about gaming, if you look at the dynamics, is that it is large scale. The scale of gaming is the equivalent to the scale of Facebook or a WhatsApp, right? It's just millions and millions of players playing these games every day.
Sure.
So the volume of interactions is far higher than any business that you can think about, right? So any vertical that you can think of, whether it's airline or, hospitality, it doesn't matter. Whichever B2C business you can think of, gaming exceeds all of that by an order of magnitude, right? And so you need so they crave automation because the volume that they get is so big that all these traditional CRMs out there, Salesforce, Oracle, all of those fall apart, right? They're also human centric. They're built for like human workflows. There's no automation capabilities in it. They just completely fall apart. So the gaming, basically all the gaming customers we won, we powered 300 of the most successful games on the planet all the way from Fortnite to Supercell, name any large billion-dollar game in the planet, and they're all completely powered by HelpShift.
Right.
They were all transformation from a legacy CRM like Salesforce or Zendesk or Oracle, right? So basically the scale is so massive that automation has to be the number one problem that you're solving for that vertical, because they really don't want to operate, like old school telecoms, right? You look at a telecom contact center. A telecom contact center probably has the same volume as a gaming contact center, except they probably have 10x the number of people that work there, right?
Yes.
A gaming contact center for the largest game that we power, which may be Fortnite, is less than 2,000 people, right? So, but an equivalent scale telecom contact center or an insurance contact center will have 20,000 people, right? That's the difference.
Sure.
And so these gaming companies were not only digitally savvy and digitally first, but they also, automation was a very, very important requirement for them, because their unit economics are so low that they really needed something where they didn't have to throw a whole lot of humans for customer service, right? So that's the second dynamic. The third dynamic is even more interesting. And the third dynamic is really where most businesses are going to sort of evolve, right? It's not just gaming. Basically, what we're headed into with cloud, with apps, with SaaS, we're basically moving into a world of subscription and free try and buy kind of approaches, right? So basically, literally every business is transforming into a free plus, paid kind of a model, where there's an extended trial period, and there's, the subscription prices have become really small, and the numbers are large, right? So in gaming, if you one thing that we observed across the board is that 80% of the gamers or players do not pay. Only 20% pay, right? So automation becomes even more critical there, because what you can do is you can segment the audience, and you can say, okay, I'm going to give a certain SLA to people that have not paid for my service, and a much higher SLA to people that have paid for the service. Or you can even micro segment in that and say, somebody who is a super whale gets, a really differentiated service, and you can create that service differentiation right in the channel, right with the automation, with all that technology that we've built. So these are the three important dynamics of gaming as a market. And I think it's widely applicable to any vertical that we look at going forward, because if you think about, any traditional business, what are they undergoing right now? They're undergoing digital transformation. What does that mean? They're all trying to figure out how to do things using modern digital sort of surfaces, just the way gaming is sort of a leader there, right? Then they're also trying to figure out how to do automation at large scale, because the old way of throwing humans at the scale problem is just a broken way that, and no vendor solved that problem. So that's why you see the rise of things like RPA, right? You're seeing RPA sort of explode because, brands are starting, even traditional brands are starting to understand that without automation, they're just going to be stuck in this infinite loop of throwing humans at problems, right? So automation is going to be key. And then the third thing that's going to be key is personalization. And that's what AI and bots enable, is that, even in the contact center today, even if you have human agents, you're not really personalizing for that user, right? So largely these agents have been trained on a certain script for a certain problem. They know how to solve it in a certain way. And there's very little personalization. What AI and bots allow a brand to do is to really personalize and tailor a journey for a customer in customer service. And that's really the trifecta, I would say, of what modern service is.
Okay. I mean, I brought that up because I think it's really interesting. It's like a backstory, because it feels like your experience in the gaming industry, given that the one, it's digital first. Two, it's kind of like it's right on the front foot in terms of innovation, and three, the scale of it in terms of the numbers and how you provide service to that. I thought it was an interesting kind of like backstory that was important to sort of like to bring out. But the interesting thing that was like, so we had a chance to meet up and chat when I was in San Francisco recently, and we were talking about this and had a bit of a wrestling match about the state of customer experience. And I think we were in violent agreement at the end, I believe.
Yeah.
But we were talking also about he had some pretty strong views on some of that sort of stuff, but to try and bring some of that stuff into light. You also have just recently published a piece of research that you produced called "The State of Customer Service Automation" in 2019. So, can you tell me a little bit about the research and kind of why you conducted it and what some of the main findings were? Because I think that will help us kind of almost like set the scene about where you think we're at and kind of like how much snake oil there is around right now.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head by calling it snake oil, right? So there's this fake news company in Silicon Valley called Facebook, and in 2015 they basically declared at their developer conference that they're going to be launching bots, and there was this big hype around chatbots. They called it Platform M and whatever, and it was supposed to basically be this amazing AI that could just talk to humans and naturally. I mean, basically people were they were showing the world a picture that you see in sci-fi movies like Space Odyssey 2001, where you have HAL and you can just go talk to HAL, and HAL basically responds in a human-like way.
Yeah.
And so they got the world. So I would, say I would credit them for getting the world to give this piece of technology some importance, right? So everybody started investigating chatbots right around that time. But what that also did is, fueled sort of this AI hype around conversational technologies, and thousands, not hundreds, thousands of companies were born, largely fueled by VC funding. That basically, literally every corner you turned, there was a company that said, we build a chatbot too, right? So basically there was just a world of chatbot companies, right? And then you also have bigger companies like IBM who took their failing sort of Watson platform and figured out that they could play to this hype, and took their old school sort of AI model that never worked anywhere and tried to like enter this space and further fuel sort of the hype, right? So you see thousands of companies peddling snake oil around chatbots and fueling this hype. So that went on for 2 years. Lots of brands basically tried to build them as pilots in the lab and realized that none of this shit was ready, right? None of this technology was ready.
Yeah.
It was all a bunch of bale wire and tape. There was a lot of training that was needed. You needed a lot of effort. You needed to build big teams that annotated a lot of data, train these machines forever. And even after all the training, the technology was falling woefully short of being ready for production deployment, right?
Sure.
So the parallel that I can give you is, Siri on an Apple device, or Alexa on a Amazon Echo device, right? All of these technologies basically are what I would call large scale failures, right? So they've been pumped into the market. Nobody really uses it. The first thing I do when I get any new Apple device is I turn off Siri, because it doesn't work, right? Other than doing basic things like, find the weather or flip a song on iTunes, it can't do anything beyond that, right? Everything beyond that is a Google search.
Right.
So that's the state of conversational technologies today. And so what we realized in 2019 is that a lot of these pilots that have been started by all these brands, whether it's insurance companies or banks, right? They built all these gimmicky chatbots that don't really work, right? And then a lot of them started publicly talking about it. They go to conferences and start talking about how much of a big effort it's been and where it's not working. And on the other hand, what we saw is our customer base was having massive success with our chatbots, right? So we introduced our chatbot technology in the market in 2018. Within a year, we had all our top customers automating anywhere from 50 to 70% of the inbound contacts using these chatbots, and they were working really well. And what's interesting is, unlike the findings of the other industries where chatbots were being piloted, we observed that across our base, CSAT was rising with the introduction of large scale automation, right?
Right.
So everywhere automation was being introduced, CSAT was dropping because these bots didn't work. And to the point where almost every retailer in the US at one point had a chatbot, whether it's Macy's or Sears, right? Everybody had a chatbot. In 2018, all those chatbots were shut down and gone. All those teams evaporated. None of those VPs who ran those AI projects, they were all looking for jobs in 2018.
Right.
Right. So basically, we saw the opposite effect of what was happening in the industry. And so we said, okay, we're going to do a state of customer service automation that basically takes the findings in our customer base where we're seeing the complete opposite happen and basically publish that, right?
Right.
And that's what we did with the customer service automation report.
And now, I know the research, I mean, so there's, like you say, there's all sorts of different sort of news out there about and reports about the impact of automation and chatbots and AI and things. And that consumers' attitudes are a little bit sort of fickle and kind of like move around depending on what sort of reports you read. I mean, have you seen any changing kind of a changing mood, as it were, around kind of consumers' attitude to automation and messaging? And does that change? Because I know your research also covers different geographies like the US and UK and Netherlands and Germany and France, etc. I mean, is there any changes and differences? Changes in attitude and also differences across geographies?
Not at all. Actually, there are two parts of the report that we published. One part was a survey, which was done across geographies, right? And that was purely to measure consumer sentiment around adoption of automation bot technology.
Yeah.
Okay. And there we found subtle differences in geographies, right? Some geographies were more ready to accept automation technology and bots, while others were not. Like, for example, if you had thrown China into the mix, it would have probably skewed the data, because in China, there is large scale adoption of bot technology thanks to WeChat and its ecosystem, right?
Sure.
Whereas the Western geographies are what I would consider laggards in comparison to China, right? So we excluded China out of our report, knowing that if we threw China in there, basically it would skew the data, right?
Right.
And like the Chinese customers are very, very open to using automation technology, whereas the Western audiences are not. And I don't blame the West. It's largely the West. We've basically got this Facebook-led fueled hype on chatbots, and a lot of vendors went in, a lot of brands got excited, and they all jumped in and launched their chatbots only to realize none of it worked. And so there's largely what we found is across consumers, if they've experienced chatbots, it hasn't been the best experience, whether it is Siri or Alexa. I mean, if you ask consumers who use Apple devices and say how useful is Siri, there's going to be a universal response that it's pretty useless, right? There's marginal utility to something like Siri because it doesn't work yet. And the same thing with Alexa and Echo.
Yeah.
So basically the Western, I would say, market, there's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, right?
Right.
Largely because consumers have been fed technology that doesn't work.
Okay.
That was the one part of our research. The other part was really data from our customer base, where we've taken a very different approach around automation than the conversational AI companies. And that approach is actually working. It's delivering results. It's driving higher CSAT. It's driving volume. In fact, in June of 2019, across our customer base, what we observed is that there's more interactions being done by our bots and automation than human agents in our contact center.
Okay. So
right?
we've reached the tipping point.
Yeah. So 60% of the interactions across our customer base now are automated, right? Only 40% are done by human beings or managed by human beings.
And when you say you've taken a different approach, I mean, can you give me a sort of, what does that mean sort of fundamentally?
Yeah, what it fundamentally means is we've applied AI for very narrow problems, not to build this master bot that can understand the world.
Which is what you were explaining to me on the whiteboard kind of when we met.
Yeah, so if you think about the conversational AI world, the beliefs of companies like IBM Watson or others, they want you to build a master bot, this big fat bot that has all the understanding of your business and all the problems your customers have, knows how to talk to them, right? It's like like a human. Now, the reality is none of that is true, right? They just
Yeah.
give you a platform that's an empty sort of box, and you have to throw a bunch of humans to go and train this machine so it can start to understand your world, right? Basically, the IBM Watson or the Google Dialog flows, none of them understand your world. They just understand basics of language, right?
Yes.
Then they have to be trained to understand your world
Right.
or the brand's world. And that's a lot of effort and training. And
Yeah.
the amount of data that you have to gather, the amount of annotation you have to do to build these bots is ridiculous, right? So we basically abandoned that path because we knew that it would be a path where people will realize very quickly the amount of effort that's needed to build something like that is multi-year, and it's so expensive that it's not even worth going down that path, right?
Right.
So we basically applied AI for things that it's really good at, right? So what is it really good at? It's good at, I would say, some sort of unsupervised search, right? And in
Right.
customer service, that applies in the area of FAQs, right?
Yeah.
So brands have lots of frequently asked questions. Those things are locked away in sort of knowledge bases, FAQs, whatever you want to call them, SharePoints, right?
Yeah.
And the simplest thing you can do is take a customer's question and find the best answer from these knowledge sources and make them available readily to the customer instantly, right? And AI is pretty good at that. And so we purpose built a AI product just to do that part, right? Then we purpose built another AI piece just to go and help a brand figure out what are the top intents or top uh, categories of questions that customers have,
Right.
and then be able to build intent detection. So from spoken words, be able to intelligently classify a problem into a certain category, right?
Right.
Once you've done the classification, you can easily use that to do routing, right?
Right.
In customer service, routing is a very big function.
Sure.
And if you can understand what the customer is trying to say and classify it and instantly route it, that's a huge win.
Yeah.
Right. So we created that whole classification model. And once that intent classification is done, the bots in our system are very different from the bots from the conversational AI world, right? The bots in our system are what I call symbolic or robotic bots. They can simply be programmed for a very narrow skill, right? So
Right.
just to give an example, let's say a customer comes into an insurance company and says, "Hey, I had an accident. I want to file a claim," right?
Yeah.
We detect that intent through our AI as a claim intent. We route it to a bot, and that bot knows exactly how to step the user through a 12-step claim filing process,
Right.
right? So it's purely like RPA. It automates that 12-step, claim filing process, so it doesn't have to be handled by a human. And it's a declarative robotic process. It's not intelligent in any way,
Yeah.
but the classification of that is very intelligent, and that works at levels of accuracy that's human levels of accuracy. So it doesn't end up frustrating the user, because as soon as they say, "Hey, I have a claim to file," or some variant of that, our AI is able to smartly classify that as a claim filing process and then invoke a bot that knows how to do that, right?
Right.
That's one of the reasons why our stuff works, is that we've basically kept it super simple. We've only taken AI to its limits where
Yes.
it's really good and it works at human levels of accuracy. Where it does not, we haven't pushed the limit. Where we know that AI is still in sort of academic research, we've stayed away from it, right? So
Right.
that's a very pragmatic way to roll out AI. We're not trying to solve all problems day one. We're trying to do a few things well.
Yeah.
And then as academic research becomes technology that's viable and starts to get tested out in the field, we will slowly roll that into our product and evolve it.
Okay.
But we're not going the deep end the way these conversational AI companies are.
Okay. And so, I know you said that you got some of your clients that have reached sort of 60% automation of all their income in bound sort of.
One gaming company that we power, which is one of the largest gaming companies in the world.
Yeah.
Right. They are the publishers of PUBG. Right. They have automated 94% of their inbound.
Well, they're superheroes, so let's kind of put them
Yes,
to
they
one
are.
side. Put them to one side. But if we take kind of like the Joe average in your pool, as it were,
Yeah,
and the 60%. I mean, can you give me an idea, typically, of you talk about kind of like these like identifying specific skills and then building specific bots to serve those kind of requirements. I mean, when we talk about a volume of about 60%, I mean, how many sort of like skills are we talking about? Are we talking about hundreds, or can that 60% be broken down into like 10, 20, 30 different sorts of skills and bots for those skills, as it were?
Yeah, very, very good question, right? So if you look at, so again, I think the world is largely made up of what I call the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
So 80% of something in a contact center is very common, repeated things.
Exactly.
20% is what I call long tail, right?
Yeah.
Things that happen, those are exceptions.
Yeah.
So we basically advise all our customers not to go after the long tail. If you want to win with automation, you want to really take the most common high volume drivers in a contact center,
yeah,
and automate them first, and then deal with the long tail once you get really good at automating the 80%, right?
Sure.
So just to give you an example, in the gaming sort of scenario, right? One of the most common problems is something called lost account. Okay.
Right.
So
yeah.
what really happens is you change your device, the next iPhone hits the market, you upgrade to the new iPhone, and you suddenly lose your game state. And you as a player, you're invested, you've paid a lot of money to level up, you've played for hours or days or months, and you're at a certain level and you've lost your game state and you want to recover it.
Sure.
Now, the problem is the gaming customer just can't hand over that game state to you, because they have to establish that you are who you are.
Sure.
Because it involves a lot of fraud, because in gaming, there are billions of dollars involved in virtual currency that people have paid for.
Yeah.
And you can't just turn an account over. So it's a very sort of painful process, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is we observed a pattern across all the gaming companies that we serve, which is hundreds of them, right? It makes up 20 to 30% of the volume of the inbound contact center.
Right. Wow.
So one intent, which is lost account, if you train an AI to be able to detect that, and then you're able to build a bot that basically handles that for that customer, right?
Boom.
You've got 20 to 30% handled right there.
Sure.
Right? So it's as simple as that. So basically, we go in and we advise our customers to just look at the highest volume drivers and just automate those one after another. Right? You can start with 5 intents, and then our customers, like you take some sophisticated customer, they've got maybe 100 intents.
Right.
But an average customer has automated 30 to 40 intents. Right?
Okay.
Now with AI, the other thing I want to say is the less number of intents that your AI is trained to handle, the more precise or the more accurate the prediction or classification will be, right? Yeah. The more concepts that you load into an AI, there is something in an AI machine learning environment called confusion, right? So as you load more and more concepts into the AI, the confusion gets higher and higher, and there's collision between the intents, and there are chances that a customer's conversation can be mislabeled or misclassified, right? Because of the confusion. So for AI, I would say for an AI-based approach, start with the highest volume drivers, start with as few of them as possible.
Yeah.
Don't try to go and build thousands of intents. Don't worry about the long tail. The long tail, is not where the big wins are. The big wins are in the head of the contact volume, which is all these large buckets of problems, common problems that customers are having.
You know what's fascinating as well is because if you get very narrow on the skill or a specific request, and you break it down like as your suggestion, because there's a theme in the experience industry right now where people are struggling to prove ROI, and you're going, actually, if you break it down as you're suggesting, it's like going, there's your ROI just there. Like you talk about the lost accounts and it reduced volume by 30%. It's like going, well, just do the maths, right?
Right.
Kind of simple, be kind of like problem focused rather than, kind of trying to build HAL, as it were, in inverted commas.
Yep.
Perfect. So, So is that, I mean, is that where many companies are going wrong? They're trying to build this HAL type of kind of super bot, and actually they need to
Yeah,
kind of,
I think the problem we really have in the industry is that uh, there is excitement and hype, and what has happened is in these companies there's executive mandate by the CXO team
yeah,
to go somehow figure out how to infuse AI in the company. They've hired all these AI officers. None of these AI officers that have been hired really come from an AI background. They're probably like IT people that
right,
don't really understand it, right? And they're just like, trying to uh, figure this out on their own. And so there's all these brand initiatives to infuse AI and automation. And the people that are working on it are not educated enough, or they don't know the problem space well enough, right?
right,
They've come from an IT background and they think it's an IT problem to solve, not realizing how much effort and training is required, right? Um, and so you see a lot of these projects basically try to boil the ocean and not keep it simple,
yeah,
because and they're trying to play to all the fantasy of Facebook and IBM, right, and all that hype, and they believe it because they don't know how to discern what is real technology that's going to work
yeah,
and what is technology that won't work, right? So you have all these people that don't really understand AI, but claiming to be AI, experts,
yeah,
running around in these brands and companies trying to like build these projects, and then not understanding what the limits are, what's practical, what's not practical. And that's why you have this boiling the ocean thing, or churning the ocean, as I call it, going
yeah,
on, right? But I think 2020 is going to be a very different year in
okay,
that a lot of these projects have failed,
mm,
right? There is large scale recognition that platforms like IBM Watson are not delivering. We're starting to see RFPs out, the early adopters of Watson back in the market with RFPs, basically trying to look at the market and see what else is out there that's working, because
mm,
the large vendors like IBM have failed to provide anything uh, you know competent or reasonable to the market, right? So
right,
I think in 2020 there's going to be a reset,
okay,
and most of these teams are going to reset their expectations. They're going to go back to much simpler things. They're going to take
hallelujah,
time. Yeah, they're going to take the time to understand, from their failure as to what didn't work,
mm,
right? And you're going to start to see a measured reset in the industry, and people are going to start looking at much more pragmatic or practical approaches.
perfect. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, I'm glad that's kind of happening. That sort of, because I've always kind of banged on around, you know, people get caught up in all the kind of the bells and whistles, but actually, I wish sometimes
Uh,
they'd just be brilliant at the basics.
yeah, I mean, you can't really blame them. It's just, the thing is, when powerful companies like IBM act in a very responsible manner,
Uh
right?
huh.
And fuel a hype through marketing when their technology is not even ready. A lot of the CXOs, CIOs that they sell to basically fall for that because they don't have, they believe that it's, oh, IBM says it, so it must work, right? And
Sure.
it's not
Sure.
true. It's
Yeah.
not true, right? So then all of these CIOs, CXOs are starting to realize that they were just sold a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, right? And they have to, and now they have to save their face because they've committed to their boards that they're going to somehow bring automation and AI, and they're going to digitally transform their brands. And the boards are asking them questions saying, "Hey, what happened? 3 years ago, you took money from me, allocated it for all these sort of AI automation projects. What have you got to show?" And the best success that most of these brands have to show to their boards is RPA. And
Yeah.
RPA is simple stuff. There's not really a lot of AI in RPA. And that stuff is working and it's delivering.
Sure.
Nothing else has delivered. Chatbots
Sure.
have not delivered, right? And so I think the day of reckoning for all these CIOs, CXOs is coming because the boards are going to question them and they say, I allocated so much budget. What
Mm.
the hell did you do with it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if I was to say to you, I mean, I am really, I'm interested in sort of improving service and experience, just generally better outcomes and stuff. But if somebody's
Yeah.
listening to this and kind of like reading the highlights, I mean, as you know, as well as I do, some people respond kind of better to kind of like simple advice or instructions.
Yeah.
And if I said to you, what would be your one piece of advice to people listening to this and saying, I want to improve my experience. And I'm thinking that asynchronous messaging or chatbots or automation is it might be an area that's worthwhile exploring. What would be your best piece of advice to them?
Yeah, my best piece of advice, especially to brands that are in the traditional sort of customer service space, largely phone based, is the biggest myth I see there is all of them somehow believe that speech recognition is going to magically work,
Right.
and that you can take the phone experience and automate it with speech recognition. They're calling it voice bots.
Yeah.
Again, it's Kool-Aid that's being dumped in the market by companies like IBM and Google and Amazon's Lex, right? They're all fueling this hype that somehow magically you can create these voice bots. We've been down that path for 20 years with speech recognition, with ASR, what we call ASR.
Yeah.
People like you and me who've spent a lot of time in the customer service industry.
Yeah.
None of that shit has ever worked, right? What is different this time that's gonna make it work? I don't even understand it, right? There is no breakthroughs there, right? It's the same old crap. None of that shit has ever worked.
Yeah.
But you see these voice guys trying to defend against digital transformation by saying, okay, let's go and experiment with these voice bots and see if it works, right?
Yeah.
And somehow stall digital transformation efforts in their companies, right? I really call upon all the contact center people to wake up and abandon the phone as a channel. Consumers have moved on, right? I don't even know why we call the smartphone a phone anymore. We don't use it as a phone. We use it as a glorified internet texting device, right? How many people do we call in our lives? We don't. And consumers have moved on, but these old school contact center people want to believe that phone's the most important channel, and you can deploy automation with voice bots inside these, phone contact centers, which is so like it's exactly we will be 20 years from now, we'll be in the same place. It wouldn't have moved the needle, just the way ASR didn't move the needle in contact centers for 20 plus years, right? We're going to be in the exact same place 20 years from now, right? And so that's really my biggest advice is whether we go to asynchronous messaging or whatever, I think the key is digital is the key to providing the best self-service experience, right? And in digital, I would say messaging is probably the most promising communication channel that consumers are using today, are comfortable with it, and it's the best way to deploy automations. But if I were to bust one myth, it's basically contact center people believing that somehow magically speech recognition technology will work and they can automate a lot of the voice interaction. That's just a fallacy. It's not going to happen.
You heard it here first, folks. So brilliant. Well, I think that's kind of that's a good thing to sort of wrap that bit up on, Avinash. So if you will, I mean, I think these interviews recently, I mean, on the back of me publishing my book, sort of Punk CX, I've been asking a couple of questions of people just as a bit my ongoing social research. And the thing, I explained to you the kind of concept before. And so the questions I have are, so what one word do you think would describe a punk approach to CX?
A punk approach to CX. That's a very good question.
If I give you some context, I mean, like punks are like, was it this?
My premise. I know your book.
The premise kind of like being that, it's about daring to be different because, the world got a little bit too prog rock and then punk exploded it exploded onto the world and just dare to be different and it was okay with not everybody liking it, as it were. And so they were willing to try new things. And so I think there's a similarity there with where service and experience is right now, kind of overly complicated, certified, codified, et cetera, et cetera.
And I would say that the early adopters of HelpShift have really punked the whole customer service market, right?
Okay.
Whether it is the gaming companies that we work with, or the technology companies, or the IoT companies that are very digitally savvy, they've punked the whole game, right?
Yeah.
When Microsoft decided to adopt HelpShift in Office 365, they were it was a punk move. Basically, they were abandoning the voice channel. I mean, today, if you go into any of the Office products and you say contact support, it's not going to direct you to a phone number.
Yeah.
4 years ago, when we started working with Microsoft, the only options you had were a phone number and an email address.
Sure.
You don't find any of those inside Office, right? What they're redirecting to you is a digital surface with a self-service capability and with conversational messaging capability, and it's very modern, and they funked the entire model, right? Why did they do that? The economics are so powerful.
Sure.
When they provided a different form of service where the contact centers would field calls from Microsoft customers, each call used to cost them on an average $7 to $23, right?
Right.
That was the range for an Office support inquiry. Today, they do that in less than $1 using messaging and with automation, right?
Awesome.
So, the punk move is to like dump all the tradition. And that's the hard part. You look at all the customer service people, they've worked so many years, they're stuck to their ways of how they, and all the vendors who serve that space have done them massive disservice by promoting myths like omni-channel. Yeah, omni-channel is interesting, but you know what? Customers today, they only deal with uni-channel. They love to message. That's all they love to do, all day in and day out. Right?
Well, they want something they just want something that works, right? And so it's
exactly.
Like it's almost a bit like going even omni-channel or multi-channel, whatever you want to call it, doesn't need to mean every channel. It just means to say, get your mix, pick your mix, make sure it's the right mix, and make sure you're bloody great at it.
Yeah.
That's it. Simple.
Pick one channel that your customers love, deliver fantastically on it, deliver everything on it, and you can always have exceptions where if a customer is the classic excuse I hear is people say, oh, but there are older people that are more comfortable on the phone. I'm like, are you kidding me? Which older person is more comfortable talking on the phone? Older people are using texting more than ever, right? I mean,
right.
there are reports that show that it's not just a Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X phenomenon. The people in the age group of 40 to 70 are also like massive adopters or users of messaging, right?
Sure.
So a lot of these excuses that all these contact center managers and tools people make is, oh, there are all these constituents. That's such a fallacy, right? I mean, it's not true at all. They just stand behind these sort of what I call myths.
Yeah. I mean, it also goes back to that simplification sort of thing that you were talking about in the 80-20 rule. If you get it right 80% of the time, there will be other, as you say, options that you might need to utilize for the exceptions.
Yeah.
Deal with the mass first. Deal with the volume.
Right.
Excellent. So, second question I have around this punk CX thing is that what company or brand do you think epitomizes a punk CX ethos?
I think Amazon.
Amazon, right?
Yeah. Oh man, their customer service is what I would say. If you go through the automated part and don't have to deal with a human,
yeah,
and most of their stuff is automated,
yeah,
right? It is just brilliant.
I know.
The minute you have to go to a human, it's debatable because I've had a few Amazon interactions with human beings in the contact center. That's not that great, right? But the automated stuff is they just nailed it. And you can take the most common things like, oh, I have something that was shipped to me that was broken, or I need to reschedule my order, or where's my order? All the common stuff that they've automated in their bots are incredible. And the amazing thing is none of that they've automated inside their chat is done in a conversational, even though they push Lex as a platform into other customers, their own customer service doesn't use Lex, right?
Sure.
That's the reality. And they do it so well. It's all robotic. It works great.
I used them the other day and it was, funnily enough, it was the first time I'd used their automated bot service because it was mostly done via kind of email and like a standard support desk type thing. And my God, it was quick and it was slick. It was really, really, really impressive.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Avinash, I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to let you go, but I just want to say you've given me a lot to think about. You've hopefully given our listeners a lot to think about as well. Busted a few myths, threw in a bunch of kind of big ideas here and there. I just want to say thank you for sharing your time with us today and your insights and your experience. That's been awesome, man.
Thank you, Adrian. Wonderful talking to you. And I hope the listeners get a bunch of value from this discussion.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as we say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.